I am currently having a bit of an organisation because I've now got some new bookshelves to fill with beautiful books. If you've seen my start of the project TBR 0 video, you'll know I have an awful lot of books that I haven't read yet. And so doing this, like building these shelves, has really made me look at some of the books that are on my shelves with a more discerning eye and thinking, do I really still want to read these, or have I outgrown the premise? Because I found that over the last, say, 12 months of reading, my tastes have changed, and some of the stuff that I thought I was going to be interested in 2 years ago even, I'm not necessarily interested in now. There are also a couple of books that I was perhaps gifted or were part of a sort of surprise box that I'm no longer, or was never, in the mood to read, but that I've kept on my shelf thinking I will at least give it a try. So I have this enormous stack here, and I thought what I would do is try a chapter of each, with a caveat there. Try a chapter of each and decide whether I want to leave it on my shelves or whether I'm just going to get rid of it. I say try a chapter. Sometimes the first chapter of a book is just, say, 2 or 3 pages long, which I don't think is really enough. Oh dear. Which I don't think is long enough to really decide whether you want to read a book or not anymore. So it might be a bit more. I think I might say 25 pages or something and just see whether I'm still in the mood for it. Along with reading the synopsis, because some of these I haven't read the synopsis for quite a while, and checking out what's written about it online. So whilst I'm not going to be swayed by whether it has a majority high rating or a majority low rating, because frankly I find that generally the books that I prefer have majority low ratings. People don't tend to like the books that I like. Don't know why. I will be looking to see if I can see other readers who have a similar taste to me, or who seem to have a similar taste, what they're saying, whether I'm still intrigued. I have noticed that we have some different themes within this pile. Let me just have a bit of an organise. So the first pile that I have here are ones that I've received as part of a book box that I don't, whilst the majority of the books I've received through book boxes have been ones that I do want to read, not all of them are. As it happens, this one that's on the front, I think, is the most intriguing to me. This is called Wishes Under the Willow Tree. A Season of Second Chances. This looks to me like chick lit. That's why I think I sort of looked at it, I was like, I don't really know. For generations, the Stone family have been making wishes under the old willow tree in their garden, and this year they're wishing harder than ever. In the small village of Noon Sun, Benedict and Estelle thought they'd found their happy ever after. But, unable to have the children they've longed for, their marriage has hit the rocks and Estelle has moved out. Devastated but unwilling to accept defeat, jeweller Benedict vows to win her back. He just doesn't know how. The unexpected and uninvited arrival of his estranged 16-year-old niece Gemma is the last thing he needs, but when a decades-old secret is brought to light, Benedict and Estelle realise they're not the only ones in need of a second chance, and that maybe the family they wished for has been there all along. So again, the synopsis doesn't sound very interesting. I'm going to read some of it, but something I've noticed is that each of the chapters, can you see, has a gemstone and then some qualities that are traditionally associated with that gemstone. So I've just shown you Moonstone. Chapter 1 is White Opal. Number 2 is Ruby. So that sounds quite intriguing. These next ones though, Christmas at Cedarwood Lodge. The wrong time of year to be trying this out, but this really does not sound very me. This Christmas it's time to fall in love at Cedarwood Lodge. After years of dreaming, Cleo Winters is finally renovating the gorgeous Cedarwood Lodge and turning it into the perfect destination for celebrations, weddings and extravagant birthday parties. Returning to the small town where she grew up, Cleo's ready for a fresh start. But with the reason she ran from her glamorous life in New York a closely guarded secret, she'll have to tread carefully, especially when the far too handsome for his own good contractor Kai shows up on her doorstep. She may have come home to change her life, but there is no way she's falling in love yet. That does not sound very me. I had in my mind this idea of reading a few books that aren't something that I would read, but I'm not sure if I can be bothered when there are so many good books to be read. But I do know my sister loves a Christmas romance, so this may have a good homecoming to it. I don't think that's here though. Angela Marson's First Blood. This, I'm not even going to bother reading you the synopsis because basically it's like a classic detective thriller, and detective thrillers are not my thing. I mean, this does sound, from the synopsis, like, I mean, this is the bit that really sort of intrigued me because it's gruesome. When the body of a young man is found beheaded and staked to the ground in the Clent Hills, Kim and her new squad rush to the crime scene. So the gruesomeness intrigues me, but I'm really not a detective thriller person, but I have plenty of family who are into detective thrillers, so we'll give it a try. I think this might be, yeah, this is one of the ones where the chapters are about 3 pages long. So yeah, that's why I'm saying, say 25 pages. And then the final one on this little list is Stop at Nothing by Michael Ledwidge. When a private jet crashes into the Caribbean Sea, diving instructor Michael Gannon is the only person on the scene. Finding 6 dead men and a suitcase full of cash and diamonds, Gannon assumes he's the beneficiary of a drug deal gone wrong. However, it seems one of the passengers was the director of the FBI, despite the official story that he died of natural causes in Italy. Suddenly pursued by a shadowy cabal of the world's most powerful and dangerous men, Gannon will only survive if he unravels a terrifying conspiracy. But those determined to kill him will learn that Gannon's past holds its own deadly secrets, and the hunters will soon become the prey. This just sounds like a classic thriller that I'm not interested in. Like, for me, I like psychological thrillers. This is just like to me, this is just like a classic, like, chasing thriller. Or, I don't even know what you call it, but, like, just not my sort of thing. But again, I have family that love a thriller, so even if I don't like it, it's going to find a good time. So that's the first 4. That is the first 4. The next one, which is, like, a bit different to the others, is a compendium of the first 4 Fear Street by R.L. Stine. R.L. Stine wrote the Goosebumps books, and I think I purchased this out of some sort of nostalgia. I saw somebody else reading some R.L. Stine and I thought, do you know what, yeah, I'd like to see if I like it. So I purchased this compendium to give it a go, and it's just sat on my shelves. I haven't bothered with it. Oh, each book is only about 140 pages. Maybe I'll read it, but anyway, I'm going to give it a try and we'll see. We'll see if it sticks around. And then the next 5 books I have were all purchased because I went through a phase of really looking for fairy tale retellings, because I knew I liked the idea of fairy tale retellings, but I didn't know necessarily much about why I liked that idea. And I think as I've been reading them, I realised that I don't necessarily like direct fairy tale or myth retellings, like any sort of retelling. I don't necessarily like it to be directly a retelling, but I like it when a narrative intertwines elements of fairy tales and narratives. These are all ones that I purchased back when I didn't really know what my tastes were. And these first 3 are all Gregory Maguire. So we've got Wicked, Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, and Mirror Mirror, which I picked out because they just sound like books that I'm not going to enjoy. However, I did just read the synopsis for Mirror Mirror, and this is a retelling of Snow White, but based on Lucretia Borgia in the 1500s, which sounds actually really, really interesting, because Lucretia Borgia, I have, you know, lots of non-fiction and things on that, because that's a time period and a thing that I just really love. So this might actually be a winner, but I don't know. We're going to give it a try. Then we've got Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. Again, it's the title that makes me just think, ugh, not interested. But this one is set in 17th century Holland. I don't really know much else about it at this point, but yeah, 17th century Holland. And then Wicked. So I have seen the musical, loved the musical, but I didn't think, like, when I picked this up for this video, I thought, I don't think I really want to just read a book of that musical. I will tell you about it in a minute. I'm not going to tell you about it yet. I did read the author's note in it, and actually it sounds really interesting. So I will tell you about that in a minute. First of all, though, I'm going to tell you about the final 2 books, which again are based on fairy tales and myths and things. So first of all, we've got The Frog King by Adam Davies. I mean, the cover is a bit cartoony, but actually, again, reading the synopsis, I find myself intrigued again. Harry Driscoll is living in New York City, if you can call trying to survive on an editorial assistant salary living. His family is wealthy, but Harry Driscoll is not. His education is Ivy League, but what good is it doing him? His publishing job is entry level with no exit in sight. But Harry Driscoll has a dream, if you call an unfinished manuscript hidden in the closet a dream. Harry Driscoll has a girl, although intercourse is out of the question. Harry Driscoll even has feelings. He asked this girl one day in the park to be in his life forever, and meant it. And the other girls, they're not the problem. The problem is Harry Driscoll cannot allow himself to say the word love. The Frog King. This is not a fairy tale. So actually, this sounds really intriguing too. And then the final one, we've got All the Ever Afters. This is the untold story of Cinderella's stepmother. As rumours about the cruel upbringing of beautiful newlywed Princess Cinderella roil the kingdom, her stepmother Agnes, a woman who knows all too well about hardship, privately records the true story. But what unfolds is not the princess's history. The tale Agnes recounts is her own. So this looks to me like it's going to be a much better look at complex family relationships. So it says, Teller's reimagined tale stands out among the best. Fairy tale aficionados will adore Teller's complex, touching retelling of this classic story of womanhood, perseverance and familial love. Whilst this does sound like a traditional retelling, and I've just said to you that I'm not necessarily interested in traditional retellings, this does sound, from the way other people have described it, as something a lot more interesting with a lot better sort of theme exploration. So we'll see. So what are my predictions? My predictions are that they're all probably going to stay on my TBR, except for these three, the two thrillers and the Christmas one. I'm unsure on Fear Street. I don't know whether this is going to grip me enough based on what I've been reading lately and what I've been enjoying. I don't think this is going to do it. So that's my prediction for what's going to actually be going. The rest of them I have a feeling I'm going to quite enjoy, but we'll see. Time for a little update on my Unhaul Reader Chapter Challenge. I decided to start with the 3 Gregory Maguires, simply because it seemed like an easy one to sort of knock off. When I read, in this previous clip, you'll see, when I read the synopses, I was like, oh, actually, yeah, no, they do sound interesting. And especially in Wicked, there is a brilliant author's note in it, Introduction to Wicked in Great Britain, in which Gregory Maguire really made me want to read this. So he talks about how he was fascinated as an American moving to Britain about the difference between American sort of fairy tales and classic literature for children, like The Wizard of Oz, which is so classically American, like everything about it feels very American, and then the British versions, which were like that written by A.A. Milne, Kipling, E. Nesbit, James Barrie and Lewis Carroll, and the differences between them. And so he kind of wanted to write Wicked, bringing in inspiration from the more British writers. He also talks about various different bits of British landscape that he wanted to bring in. So he talks about how in the university section, so the school that the witches go to, he wanted that to feel like it was in the Lake District in England. And then I can't remember where it is in this, but he also mentions that the bit about the universities, he was saying, is there a bit of Oxbridge in the depiction of Shiz University? Yes, of course. Blunt and Burgess in Elphaba, and Bok, yes, and the talking animals owe something to Orwell and C.S. Lewis both, as well as to Beatrix Potter. So yeah, so he was drawing on inspiration from Animal Farm by George Orwell. And so that did make me think, do you know what, maybe I do want to read this, but I don't think I do. All that sounds very intriguing, but I don't think I really do want to read it. Then we've got Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. So again, this one, I was reading some more information on it, because yes, the historical aspect and the way that it's set and the sorts of characters that he's putting in it do sound relatively intriguing. And in fact, when I was looking up information online, it suggests that our narrator may be autistic. So it's not explicitly said, but apparently as the book unfolds, you sort of start to get that feeling that she might be autistic, which again, disability rep, and that is really important to me. But reading the online synopsis, which is a bit more thorough than the one on the back of the book, I just think it's too close to like a YA retelling of a fairy tale. Like, it just didn't capture me. So yes, there were elements that sounded interesting, but no, I'm not going to read it. And then Mirror Mirror, which is the one that is Snow White, but taking inspiration from Renaissance Italy and the family that Lucretia Borgia was part of. Now, that intrigued me because I'm very interested in that, but having looked into it, it's very much with that stereotype that Lucretia Borgia was, frankly, an evil woman. and that's what it's based on, whereas you can tell I'm actually very interested in Lucretia Borgia. So I haven't read this, but I love this because it's sort of like a feminist dive into Lucretia Borgia's life and how she has been misrepresented in history. So Lucretia Borgia's name has been a byword for evil for more than 500 years. The illegitimate daughter of Pope Alexander VI, she has been charged with murder by poisoning, incest with her father and brother, and complicity in their political assassinations. She was 12 years old when her ruthless father became pope, only 13 when forced into her first marriage to suit his political ends, 17 when, for the same cynical reason, she was made to divorce her husband. There were dark rumours of an illegitimate child fathered by the Pope, and chroniclers called her the greatest whore in Christendom. Her second husband soon outlived his political usefulness and was murdered on the orders of her brother Cesar. It was only with her third marriage that Lucretia came into her own as Duchess of Ferrara, the enlightened ruler of a magnificent court, a capable administrator, and a woman of intelligence and compassion. Far from being a helpless pawn, Lucretia was a survivor, skillfully navigating her way through a dangerous world in a time of war and fratricidal conspiracy, carrying on love affairs under the nose of her jealous husband and his spies. In this breathtaking new portrait, Sarah Bradford reveals the true woman behind the myth. So I would rather read this than read this. So that's 3 books that are going to be gone, and we'll start the next bit. We interrupt your scheduled programming to bring you some slight shelf updates. So whilst it's not completely finished, I thought I might start taking you through some of my shelves, because I think many people like looking at other people's shelves. Everything that's going to be here is going to be stuff that is on my TBR. In this room is just fiction. Yeah, just fiction. But I've tried to sort of separate things out into different areas that make sense to me. So I thought I'd take you through that so you can see some of the books that I have on my TBR. We're going to start somewhere easy. So down here are my library books. So there's my 2 little stacks of library books that I need to read. And then just above that, this is, so that you know that I'm not cheating when it comes to it, this is my stack for TBR Tackle. I want to join in with KD Books TBR Tackle from next month. So those are the 4 that I have to start with. I've tried to go for something varied. So on the bottom we have non-fiction, we have a classic, we have something that's very new to my TBR, but that is an author that I've read before, so Monique Roffey's The Tryst. And then on top, something a bit different, so that's a play based on Frankenstein. And then if we come up another shelf, here we have books that I have received through various book box subscriptions that I have at some point in the past been part of. Yeah, so quite a variety. However, if a book is by an indie publisher or is hardback, then it goes somewhere else. Because if we come round this corner, okay, this book I have already read, it's just one of my favourite books. But here we have a hardback shelf. So yeah, so here we have hardback. So these are the slightly shorter hardbacks. And then we come down and we have standard size hardbacks. And we're going to come along. I really love these new shelves. Yeah, so these are all on my TBR, yes. Although I suppose technically, look, we've got fiction, non-fiction, they probably shouldn't be there, but anyway. And then we come down another shelf, possibly my favourite shelf, and we have indie published books, except for the Angela Carter's Fairy Tales, which is Virago Press. But yes, that's all my indie books. Now, if it's indie but it's hardback, it's up there. Generally, the hardback shelf takes precedence, so if something is hardback, I put it on the hardback shelf. If something is indie, then it goes on the indie shelf, unless it's hardback. And then over here, these are like my prize books. So anything that's been nominated for a prize, such as the Booker, the Women's Prize, the Goldsmith Prize, the Barbellion Prize, anything at all, or even just on lists of books that you should read, like the best books ever. That's all on this shelf, and I've tried to do it in like publication order. So over here we have the newest. This one actually is indie, but it's right next to the indie shelf. So that's 2021 published. We come through the 2000s to the 90s, and then over here, and we have the 1800s. So then we're going to come up a shelf, and we have my Persephone books, and these are the Persephone books that are on my TBR. I do have a few that I have read. I read 3 Persephone books. Those are the rest. And then if we come up another shelf, here is another little TBR stack. This one is going to be for the next round of scavenger hunt. So I've done the scavenger hunt and these are the ones that are going to be on my TBR for that. But as you will have seen from all my reading plans have gone out the window video that's come up, I've had to put everything that I had planned aside and I'm now going to be just reading library books for a while. Hello! So we have another little bookshelf over here that I haven't finished filling, but in general, there are the books that I'm doing for my tried chapter tag, other than obviously the Gregory Maguires, which I've already tried. And then what we have here is just sort of miscellaneous books that are on my TBR. These are all the fiction books that don't quite fit into any other reason for being on another shelf. They're not indie, they're not... Although some of them may be indie. I may not know certain publishers are indie. But yeah, here we go. Some of them are borrowed from family members. For instance, Bernard Cornwell, my cousin Rachel, P.D. James, those are all borrowed from my parents. Yeah, we have quite a range. Some classics, some modern, some that may well end up on future Try a Chapter and Unhaul tags. But yeah, here we go. Obviously that does mean that there's quite a few books that are missing from this. You cannot see any of the books that I've read, so all of my 5-star books are not in here. I haven't yet decided how I'm going to set up my to-study shelves, which I love having. I love having a to-study shelf. My non-fiction books are kind of chaotic because some of them are on my to-study shelf and some of them are just sort of general like photography books and stuff. So yeah, so I haven't quite finished, but there is at least a start on how I'm organising it. Oh, should we do a wide shot? Oh, shelves. Oh, you're so beautiful with all the books on you. Okay, can we see? This print is one that I made myself. If you are interested in buying any of my prints, the link is in the description because I do sell my darkroom prints. They're all handmade. This one I purchased from another seller called Prince of Darkness. I can't remember who made this watercolour of... In fact, let's get closer. Who made this watercolour of the swimmers? But that's beautiful. I bought that in a art shop in Frome. And then this beautiful lion was created by an artist called Hannah Waldron. Here's my print. Yours! Yeah, so thank you. Back to the programme. Yeah, I am now sat in front of some shelves with some actual books. I quite like all the colours on there. I mean, whilst I like a good colourful shelf, I'm not a rainbow shelf person. I quite like that. But we are still working on what we're doing. We're not quite sure whether it's going to be little prints, a big butterfly thing that my husband loves. But anyway, I'm being brutal today. I'm being utterly brutal. And I've decided I am just not even going to bother with these 3. They are just being unhauled. As I say, my sister loves a Christmas romance, so I'll send that to her because I don't want to. And then these 2, I've got family members who love these. So these are the 2 thrillers. I don't know, just not my cup of tea. So I'm just going to be brutal, and they're going. So that's 6 out of 10 books that I unhauled there. Yes. So I read the prologue in the first chapter of the first story. So this is a compendium of 4 stories. And actually that's written quite well. I mean, I say well, it's really engaging. So I think these are going to be 4 relatively short, fun stories to read, so I'm going to keep that one. Okay, I've made the decision that I don't want these on my shelves anymore, so we're going to get through them. I've just finished a piece of work and it is time to take a break. Now, we're going to start with All the Ever Afters by Danielle Teller. Now at the back, not only are there some reading group discussion questions, but there is an essay about the book. I knew this one looked a bit more interesting than a standard retelling, because it said, you know, in the back it says things like, there are no gold standard measures when it comes to the soul. One person's brave is another person's foolish, and one person's honest is another person's cruel. Two individuals can witness the same human interaction and come away with vastly different stories about what they saw and heard. And that's something very similar to what Jeanette Winterson explores in her books. This idea of you can't really have an autobiography that's accurate because what you've experienced might not necessarily be how someone else has experienced it. So then she also goes on to say, I have always loved fairy tales, but these stories provide a reductive view of life, where characters are heroes or villains, good or bad. There is comfort in such portrayals because we can feel unadulterated joy when heroes succeed and villains are punished. But it worries me when we are tempted to see real life in these same terms, that we sometimes reduce ourselves and others to stereotypes of good and bad, manufacturing air cover to judge the people we don't like and excuse those we do. So it definitely seems like she's put a lot more thought into this than the standard fairy tale retelling. And then she says, the cognitive dissonance about beauty that girls and women live with was a potent motivator for writing All the Ever Afters. Similarly, rescue via marriage has never struck me as a great aspiration for girls to learn from fairy tales, and it was fun to play with the theme of women rescuing themselves and each other. So yeah, so I'm going to have a go at reading the first chapter or so. Oh, also, really floppy. I'm going to keep this one on my shelf. This one is, so we start sort of in the future, so let's say present day. We start in present day where the whole like story of Cinderella has already happened, and the stepmother is sat chatting to one of the other dignitaries at like a court dinner, and he's saying, you know, how much of this story is true, you know, how did she's called Elfrida, Cinderella is Elfrida. How did she meet the prince? And is everything they said about how your daughters, as in the ugly stepsisters, are so ugly? And she's sort of saying to this man, you know, don't believe everything you hear. I thought there was a really lovely line actually. Compelling fiction often obscures the humble truth. So we're starting there where she's being asked about the truth of the story, and then that prompts her to decide to write like a diary or like an account of what it is. And so then chapter 1 begins with her writing her own story. So yeah, as I say, it's quite beautifully written actually, but not so much so that it becomes too slow. I have read some retellings that become overly slow and almost sort of classic in writing. So I am going to keep that one and try it later. The next one here is The Frog King by Adam Davies. So this one I think is much more contemporary. There's nothing in it to tell me anything more. I might have to do a bit of research, but I'm going to try... How long are the chapters? Oh, it starts with a Baudelaire quote. I have more memories than if I were 1,000 years old. Okay, right. Let's try. Let's get going and see how we find it. Okay, we finished trying a chapter for the remaining books. I decided, so The Frog King became a maybe because the writing was a little bit jarring, but it was sufficiently different to everything else that I'd read that I was like, I want to do a bit of research. There's nothing really in here that tells you much about, like there's no essays like there was in All the Ever Afters, whatever that one was called. So there was nothing really telling me whether this was one to go for or not. So I have now done some research, and I think I'm going to let this one go. There was some really amazing... Here's having a drink. There were some really amazing reviews, you know, 5-star reviews that made it sound like this was an interesting look at being young in the publishing industry. But the thing is, it's like a young white male, 20-something. Sorry about Mia drinking there. Why? Why now? Why not 5 minutes ago before I started filming? Anyway, yeah, do we need another perspective of a young white male who can't keep it in his pants in New York City? No, not really. So that, along with the fact that the writing style I found a bit like iffy. Like, if it was a really good story and the reviews were amazing, yes, I would try and get past it, because I'm sure you can just get used to it. But I'm not going to bother. So that's another one gone. And then the other one that I tried was Wishes Under the Willow Tree. Now, I gave this a chapter, and it just felt too sort of generic contemporary literature, what I would call like chick lit, like soft. Like, obviously it's going to be an emotional book. It's, you know, you start off knowing that the man's wife they've separated because they were trying to have children and it's not working out for them. And so it's like got that sort of classic chick lit feel to it. It may well go a lot deeper, but it really just didn't feel like anything that I want to go for. But this is another one that I think my sister might quite like. So we've got 2 books going to my sister, 2 books that I've got other family members that I think will really like, 4 going to the charity shop, unless anyone is interested in the 3 Gregory Maguires or the Frog King. So I've done much better than I thought. I thought I'd be keeping a lot more of these, but I'm only keeping 2. So I feel a bit good for getting 8 books off of my TBR without actually having read them. I don't know. Anyway, hey, see you later.